fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Oh, that's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, man. Well, if there's a thing, it's rotating.
All right, that was a video released by the Department of Defense that shows a Navy jet crew's encounter with a UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, more commonly known as UFOs. The government has been releasing more videos like these as part of a new office working to detect these sightings and then share information with the public. Joining us now, New York Times bestselling author Garrett M. Graff. His new book is entitled UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. It's good to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It's broken up into three. I don't know if this is a good way to start, but I want to understand what you've done here. Broken up into three parts: the saucer age, the space age, and the interstellar age. What does that mean? What are you looking at? And is there life out there?
So the math is on the side of the aliens, and that's one of the biggest transformations in astronomy and science over the last 20 years.
Okay.
In the 1990s, we did
The
not
hammer
know.
comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Anything is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the show. Armor of Truth Live number 278, Saucers and Psyops. There you go. Are physical aliens interacting with mankind today? Did physical aliens at some point in our past interfere with evolution? One can expect among new religious movements, which is what I'm arguing that the UFO movement is. It's a new religious movement. Will interpret humanity's origins in distinctly physical terms, using various versions of the UFO narrative, or what we're calling the Extra-Terrestrial Hypothesis, as an explanation, regardless of the lack of evidence. These are macro histories, and they involve a commitment to the view that actual visitors from other planets have dramatically affected our past and will return to connect with us in the future. This is a view popularized in Eric von Daniken's book. You know, the book that started the ancient alien movement, Chariots of the Gods, ? UFO technical expertise and insemination, for example, changed the human course forever. And the biblical Genesis could remain true for those who wanted to try to crowbar this in there. If you say Adam and Eve were the first two new beings created by the Anunnaki, or whoever you like to say it is, post-visitation. And you have various views like the Urantia, the Urantia book, which is supposed to have been a channeled text from aliens in a different part of the universe. The Raelian cosmic view. You've got the idea of the Pleiadians. We talked about this the other day. Barbara Masiniak's book, Bringers of the Dawn. And why might someone believe that? But in the opening clip, you heard the author of this new book, UFO, the inside story of the U.S. government's search for alien life here and out there. His name is Garrett Graff. And you heard him say something interesting there, right? He said that the math is on the side of the aliens.
So the math is on the side of the aliens, and that's one of the biggest transformations in astronomy and science over the last 20 years.
Okay.
In the 1990s, we did not know that there was a single other planet outside of our solar system.
And because now, according to astronomers, now we know that there are other planets. There are other habitable planets. And therefore, this supports the idea, the belief that there is life elsewhere in the universe. Do you see any problem with that argument? The discovery of other possible habitable planets doesn't increase the likelihood that there would be aliens. It makes it even less likely. We'll talk about this a little more as we get into it. But let's just, to be clear, it is life in this universe is so tenuous. It's so fragile. It's so unlikely that we shouldn't even be here. That is the view that comports with both science and the scripture. All right, let's move ahead here. So Garrett Graff is going to talk about this. We'll come back to him in just a moment because he's going to make, here on MSNBC, here on Morning Joe last week, in a seemingly secular interview, he makes a religious claim or a spiritual claim, and we'll see this in a minute. It's very interesting. But first, before we get to that, let me show you some other examples here. For example, this is the kind of narrative that we're dealing with right now.
If the crash retrievals are true, then all bets are off.
It's very hard for people to get their minds around where the real power is. And it's not at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The reality is something much more stark.
They've been working on this for 60, 70, perhaps 80 years.
The reason why the government is talking about these UFOs now, they're getting ready for the next level of war.
Are these objects a national security concern?
They're proffering a narrative of a national security threat that doesn't exist.
I call them alien reproduction vehicles. They're made by private corporations somewhere on this planet.
Technology from Roswell from 1940.
Two basic views. Three, really. Either these are aliens coming from far away galaxies, or these are, or they're not aliens, and what people see in the skies are, as one gentleman said there, they're just exotic technology. And the other worldview is that these are, the other part of the extraterrestrial hypothesis is that these are just interdimensional beings. Ultra-terrestrials is another term used for that. All right, so you see the idea there. Are they benevolent? Do they mean us good? And you saw there John D'Souza. Check this out.
And I'll tell you, the next step, it's a little difficult to hear, but the next step, because they need to keep building up the fear of these UAPs, next step is really for the UAPs to start shooting down our commercial airliners and our military jets from the skies. And that, I believe, is going to be happening very, very soon.
Of course. That's right. That's right. It's redacted. Redacted loves John D'Souza. And I have to say, in all due respect, I've never met a more incredible witness or source than John D'Souza. He's a retired FBI agent, but I don't think he can believe half the stuff he says. We have, folks, if you'll check the playlist on this channel, the extraterrestrial deception or the alien deception, there's a playlist that has all of these videos. We've talked about this many times over the years. So check that out for a little more. Here's some more for you.
They're going to have to do something else. And I think fake alien invasion is one of the main things they have ready. And
3 U.S. officials have confirmed to ABC News the U.S. military shot down another high-altitude object this afternoon.
But we have to know what they're doing, okay? And we don't know exactly.
Here's one of the keys to understanding fake alien invasion. It is military officials that are working with the cabal because they really need to get the fear up to get back on the map with this fake alien invasion. And we're going to see a lot more politicians start supporting the Tic Tacs and the UAPs.
Let's go to Helene Cooper, New York Times.
This is for General Van Herk. Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrial? Because that is what everyone is asking us right now.
I haven't ruled out anything at this point.
Yeah, so there you go. This is, over the past year or more, we've had this jump, this spike in the narrative again. In fact, over the past, since 2020, we've seen the U.S. government willing to hold hearings, willing to come out and talk about this. We also have Clayton. I love Clayton. I do. But Clayton is, he's well, gosh, how do you explain this? Maybe I should just leave Clayton alone tonight. Let me just leave him alone tonight. Well, because he's got, Stephen Greer on his channel.
Well, for the first time in history, a U.S. government whistleblower has testified before Congress that the United States government has in its possessions extraterrestrial beings. Yes, non-human pilots, the bodies recovered from crashed UFOs. And while you watch this testimony that I'm about to show you, remember that it is a federal crime to lie under oath before Congress. It's very important for you to remember that, and the very thing that could put Dr. Fauci behind bars for the rest.
It's not just a federal crime to lie under oath, it's also a sin to bear false witness. And that doesn't only mean that if you know you're lying, to knowingly share information that you don't know is true is also a sin.
Of his life. Watch.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Non-human biologics. All right, I'll spare you. I won't go into it again here this time, but does non-human biologics, does that mean necessarily, well, it's obviously aliens. There was a period of time, through the 50s and the 60s when they were shooting capsules up left and right, and without humans. In fact, they were piloted. Piloted might not be the right word, but inside of these capsules were everything from insects to rodents, all types of vermin, monkeys, dogs, cats, Russia and the U.S. and other nations too. So if you find a crashed craft of some kind out there and you check the DNA and it's not human, that doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't tell you really anything at all. But anyway, this is, we're not going to stay on Grush too much. This show is not about Grush. I'm just trying to bring you back up to date with what we've seen and heard over the past year?
Helene Cooper, New York Times.
This is for General Van Herk. Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrials?
I haven't ruled out anything at this point.
Helene Cooper, New York Times.
This is for General Van Herk.
So that was the I think this was back from February of last year when we had that flap, the Chinese balloon was shot down. And then there was in the couple weeks after that, there were all kinds of sightings up in the Yukon, up around the Great Lakes area. And it's obviously aliens.
Another unidentified object was shot down.
The latest twist of the high drama playing out in the sky.
Officials have confirmed to ABC News that another high-altitude object was shot down Sunday afternoon.
Thank you. Let's go to Helene Cooper, New York Times.
Here she is again.
This is for General Van Herk.
Again with General Van
Because
Herk.
you still haven't been able to tell us.
Same thing. He's not ruling anything out. Human beings are terrible witnesses, terrible observers. That's why police officers and military, security officers have to be trained how to be good observers. We're just not naturally good observers. And we get things wrong. So check this out. This might be a little risky as far as copyright, but fair use. I'm using it. Check this out. Can you get things wrong? Like, look at this. This is clearly some kind of, some kind of UFO, right? Look at this.
Écoutez s'il vous plaît. This next story is our first from Quebec, Canada. And it's an important first in another way, too. We've seen videos of UFOs that are tic-tac shaped, cigar shaped, saucer shaped, of course, and even cube shaped. But we've never seen one that looks like this. Voici. Quebec, 2018. A French-speaking family is on an outing enjoying a cloudless day when they notice something in the sky and start recording. A bizarre object rotates slowly, seeming to shine bright red and green
There it
light.
is. I want to talk over this. There it is. What is that, folks? It clearly looks like it's on fire, or it's flaming, right? What is going on here? This is definitely some kind of craft. It's a ship. It's a ship.
The family grows increasingly certain they've spotted something extraordinary. And check this out. At moments, it looks like this thing is flaming, something we've never seen before. Is it a craft burning off fuel as it ascends into space? Journalist MJ Banias.
Okay, so let's help you out with this. That is some excellent evidence, right? Look at this. Look at this evidence, folks. Look at this evidence. Wait a minute. What is this evidence? What are we actually looking at here? Folks, that is a Mylar balloon. That is a Mylar balloon. Now, I don't know what that Mylar balloon is supposed to be in the shape of. What the folks in the clip were doing is if it's a Mylar balloon, I don't know exactly what is that. What is that letter? What is that number? Well, maybe it's not in English. Maybe it's not an Arabic or Western, number or script or letter. Maybe it's Chinese, but it's clearly a Mylar balloon. I have, we've seen clips of congressmen and senators and the what's the name of that group? Tom DeLonge's group, To the Stars Academy. We've seen, doing presentations, lectures, big video board behind them with this craft on it that's obviously a Mylar balloon shot from a distance. And, in this direction, you've got probably the sunset. Sky is very red, yellow, and so it's reflecting the Mylar. So, this is the kind of thing. Most of these unidentified objects are things like this. Some of them are not. Some of them are craft, are exotic technologies. Let's listen to this.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
The 2017 New York Times article, in my mind, made that was a big shift, because when the New York Times is reporting about it and saying that this is major news and this is real and there's video evidence that they can't ignore, when you talk to high-level people at the government and people like Commander Dave.
So Joe is talking about, first of all, the 2017 New York Times article, because that is what got all of this started. Leslie Keene, Ralph Blumenthal put this article out. This article has been debunked to death. Nobody's talking about that. It's inconvenient. We've talked about it here. I'll tell you more about it in just a minute, why it's a problem. But listen to just a bit more of this.
David Fravor, who had that infamous spotting off of the coast of San Diego. When you hear about people like that are very reputable, it starts to change the conversation in a lot of people's eyes.
Right. See, it used to be that one person would see something in the sky and say, look, Martha, look, there's something up there. Now things have changed. Now we have multiple sightings by multiple modes. That is the gold standard. The gold standard for looking for these objects. Not just one person, but several people that are reputable. Not just radar, but visual sighting, infrared sensors, telescopic evidence. Now we have multiple sightings by multiple modes. And so the burden of proof has shifted. It used to be the burden of proof was on the people who believed in UFOs. They saw something, prove it. Now the burden of proof has shifted to the Pentagon, to the military. Now they have to prove that these aren't extraterrestrial. And so I think there's been a sea change in the last just several years.
See, you can't prove that these are not extraterrestrial. You can't prove a negative, right? Michio Kaku, great scientist, not a good philosopher. Yeah, I'll show you this for a second, too, just to show you a little bit about how a false narrative works. I'm not claiming or blaming David Grush for lying. I think it's quite possible that he's being duped in some way. For example, where's my... Let's see, I had a clip. Well, I had a clip. That's not immediately showing up here. But what it was Joe Rogan questioning whether or not Grush might be being used, right? Kind of like a useful idiot, or a kinder term, just a dupe. Is it possible that Grush was shown documents, or that Grush was given testimony from the inside just to see how far it would go? Just to see how much of it that the people would believe. Remember, for those of you who know who William Cooper is, he described, early on he described seeing documents when he was in the Navy working under the commander of the Pacific Fleet. He was in a Navy intelligence position. He was privy to documents, certain documents, and while he was there, saw documents that seemed to indicate that there were extraterrestrial beings in the government's possession. He said he saw pictures and documents. Well, later on in his life and his career, he came out and said, I'm sure that I was duped. I'm sure that they put those documents in front of me for some other purpose, to see what would happen, to see what I would say as a test or whatever. So there's precedent for this. It's clearly, folks, it's possible for intelligence agencies to run some kind of operation like that, to see if this person is trustworthy, or to run what they call a trial balloon, to put an idea out there through the media or through someone, just to see how the public reacts to it, to test, take the pulse of the culture and see whether or not people have come to a position whether they will accept certain things or not. So just check this out as you listen to Grush tell his story. And then I'm going to get back to Garrett Graff, who has written this new book, and he's a New York Times best-selling author, and it basically is repeating the claims of Grush and the others, saying that the U.S. government has in its possession alien beings' bodies. biologics.
UFOs exist, and they are indeed of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously.
Okay, now, as we go through this, pay attention for any evidence. What is the evidence? Is it evidence? Or are these just claims?
For the very first time, the world is about to hear from a former high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government unidentified aerial phenomena task force. And now in a News Nation exclusive, David Grush, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
What conclusion did you come to on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will. Non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
Do you have an alarm? How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No.
Is he having a laugh?
I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse.
You having a laugh?
People started confiding in me. They approached me, and they provided me documents and other proof.
Are you having a laugh?
Grush alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the intelligence community inspector general. News Nation has confirmed David Grush's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators.
We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators.
He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
And there you go. Is he having a laugh?
Are you having a laugh?
Lies.
Can't show us the proof.
Conspiracy theories.
For national security reasons.
Junk science. Quackery.
He's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself.
Quackery.
We've not seen or verified the alleged proof.
And wholesale fiction.
But has talked extensively with other intelligence officials.
We control them.
Who have.
And we can remake them.
It gets creepier.
Yes, it does get creepier. Well, that brings us back around now to... Oh, here's the clip. Here's Joe Rogan wondering if Grush is being duped.
David Grush is that UFO whistleblower that testified in front of Congress.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, man. The thing about it is, I believe he's telling the truth as far as what he's experienced and the documents that he uncovered and the people that he talked to. But how do you know whether or not they're just using him as a useful idiot to just get out some silly story because they're covering up for the fact that there's some very advanced drone system that the United States government has they're trying to keep under wraps?
Right.
It might be
Tough
both.
to know.
I think it's probably both things.
Yeah. Here's an article that Summer came across from The Atlantic, the new age of UFO mania. It's out there, right? It's part of the narrative now. It's everywhere. It's in mainstream reporting. It's accepted now, right? Now there's a new book that looks at the inside story of the UFOs, right? Here we go. Now we've got real journalists on the task, right? It's no longer Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who are obviously UFO activists. Now there's a real researcher, a real best-selling author of Watergate, finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Look at this, a couple other books he's written. Watergate, A New History. The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11. Ah, okay. And Raven Rock, which is the story basically of the continuity of government centers, where there's places around the United States where underground facilities where the government could continue in case of a catastrophe of some kind. So what do you see here? What do you see here? What do all these have in common? These are all dealing with sensitive issues that all have conspiracy theory attached to them. It's all about it's historical accounts. So he's writing about the historical accounts of these issues that have long been fodder for conspiracy theory. So it looks like, it's just my opinion, and I don't know this for sure, but it seems like that Garrett Graff is one who writes the official narrative, who comes back with the authority of the New York Times, the gravitas of the mainstream on his side, to make sure that everyone who goes out seeking to find out, like, what about that 9/11 thing? Well, here you go. Here's a New York Times bestselling author who has written an oral history of 9/11 and Watergate and all the rest. So, here's the approved message. So let's go back to that interview on MSNBC. Again, the book is called, right here, UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There by Garrett M. Graff. It's from Simon & Schuster. I think it would be probably reasonable here to just tell you a little bit about the book. It's Simon & Schuster calls it the first comprehensive and eye-opening exploration of our government's decades-long quest to solve one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Are we alone in the universe? So there's a claim right off the bat. Has the government actually been studying this issue for decades? My friends, there actually is very little evidence to support the fact that our government has been studying extraterrestrials, or the likelihood of extraterrestrials in existence. We know that we have SETI, and SETI hasn't found anything in 50 years. They've heard nothing, seen nothing. We've covered that here too. But the assumption, right, it's a decades-long quest for the truth. Are we alone in the universe? Simon & Schuster, when the blurbs on the book says, for as long as we've looked into the skies, the question of whether life on Earth is the only life to exist has been at the core of the human experience, driving scientific debate and discovery, shaping spiritual belief, for sure, and prompting existential thought across borders and generations. And yet, the idea of extraterrestrial intelligence has been largely seen as a joke, banished to the realm of fantasy and conspiracy. Now, for the first time, the full story. The full story. All of it. The whole story. In other words, the official, accepted, approved story of our national obsession with UFOs and the covert, decades-long search by scientists, the United States military, and the CIA for proof of alien life. Those are assumptions. We don't really have any evidence to support the claim that our government or CIA or the military has been looking for extraterrestrial life. They haven't. because it's a fool's errand. There's no evidence. There's no evidence to support such an endeavor. Right? There is none. And, we'll talk about Project Blue Book and all that in just a moment and what that actually was. Now, when I say they haven't been trying to figure out whether aliens exist and are real or not, that's not the same thing as the government studying what's flying around in the atmosphere and the origins of those craft or objects. So anyway, this story is told by best-selling author, Pulitzer Prize finalist Garrett M. Graff in a deeply reported and researched history. So Graff clearly is sort of an American government history writer, and he's going to come back and provide the official narrative, the official accepted story. It goes on to say that this book draws from original archival research, declassified documents, and interviews with senior intelligence and military officials. Graff brings every moment of this extraordinary quest to life, transporting readers from secret military meetings and congressional hearings where the validity of the search is debated to the cluttered offices of ufologists and hoaxers determined to see the truth revealed. Remote observatories where astronomers monitor the stars, that would be SETI, and SETI in 50 plus years has heard nothing, has seen nothing, has produced bupkis, no evidence of anything at all. Even the halls of the White House, it says, where staffers and presidents alike eagerly await answers. Filled with twists and turns and populated by an unforgettable cast of characters, UFO is a thrilling story of science, national security, the secrets of space, and the enduring mysteries of the universe. So exciting, right? Here's the thing, folks. You don't need to buy this book. You can check out journalist Stephen Greenstreet, who writes for he's a contributor to the New York Post. You go to the New York Post's YouTube channel. I'll show you the video, I think, here in just a minute. You go to the New York Post's YouTube channel and to the playlist, and you'll see something called The Basement Office. And you'll see this journalist, Stephen Greenstreet. You'll see him over time. If you go back to the beginning of The Basement Office, you'll see Greenstreet over time as he begins covering the UFO topic as a believer. But he's a good journalist, and he follows the evidence where it leads. And over time, he eventually came to understand that this is all hooey, and these people involved in it are spinning a big yarn. So you need to check that out. I encourage you to check that out. So let's listen to just a little bit more of what Garrett Graff has to say here. Remember, he said the math is on the side of the aliens. That is quite a claim. Reasonably, the opposite is true. If we're finding more and more planets, but we still don't have any evidence that there are extraterrestrials among us, well, then that makes it even less likely that there are. But, he's got to sell his book, and his book is called UFO. So let's listen to this. Especially, I want you to hear what he says about our consciousness.
Life is probably actually quite common out there across the universe.
Oh, Garrett, let me back up.
So this book tries to weave together sort of twin threads of the U.S. military's hunt for UFOs here, which dates back to the sort of the early days of the Cold War, the dawn of the flying saucer age, 1947, Roswell sort of incidents that people are familiar with, and then the sort of evolving astronomy science that shows that life is probably actually quite common out there across the universe.
There has never been anything of the sort. Again, in 50 years, SETI has heard that's what they do. They listen. They have radio telescopes. So they're listening for artificial intelligence, signals that would come from that are not natural. Why we would assume that that's what a civilization out there would be broadcasting, we're assuming that they would be like us anyway. There's no evidence at all to support the claim that it's, life out there is probably common. That's just he's just saying that. It's just no evidence. The evidence is to the contrary. It's extremely unlikely that we should even exist.
We have a sectillion question.
One in six. We could apply that to the New York Jets' chances to the Super Bowl. In the last segment, it does seem like there's been a really sharp increase of people thinking they've seen them. Now, some of that could probably be attributable to people having cameras, right? So but it also seems like the government is suddenly being way more forthcoming about these things. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so that's actually what got me interested in this subject. Was you now see sort of serious people talking seriously about this subject. I sort of started this book in my mind.
That's the evidence, folks. Serious people are talking seriously about it, and therefore now it's relevant. All right, let's listen. Oh, we got Reverend Al's in the house here too. I just want you to hear this comment here.
Some chunk of what the answer to UAPs and UFOs actually are.
On that physics part, do you think that government, now that they are becoming, as you talk about in the book, more open to talking about the existence of UFOs. Do you think government will get to the point of trying to explore exactly what these UFOs are going back to, what kind of life? We may not understand it as our kind of life. When do we start making it real, and rather than speculate on what it could be?
Yeah, so that to me is part of this really interesting shift that we've seen in the last couple of years, is the U.S. government sort of trying to talk a little bit more openly about this. To me, though, there is a government cover-up about UFOs. It's just not the one that most people think it is. And that the government, I think, at the end of the day, is covering up its ignorance about what this phenomenon actually is. But it's not that there's sort of a secret hangar under Area 51 a la Independence Day. It's the government, that John Brennan's right, that there's weird stuff up there. It puzzles us. We don't know what it is. And the government sort of is trying to not tell us that it fundamentally doesn't know.
Well, that's nice. That's good to hear, right? The fact that it is more likely that our government and military are ignorant of more things than they actually know, right? Because look at the way it functions today. But the book is full of errors, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But here, there's just this comment about our consciousness.
I think if the government was covering up the existence of aliens, Trump would have just blurted it out.
Of course.
So,
or he's got the documents down at Mar-a-Lago talking about them. No, but so do we get closer to knowing by reading this book?
I think you do. Okay. And I think that the dawning math and the evolution of sort of what we are going to discover in the next couple of decades is going to fundamentally transform the way that we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness.
The new book.
Did you catch that? The evidence that we're discovering now is going to have a major impact on, let's say it one more time, our cosmic consciousness.
The dawning math and the evolution of sort of what we are going to discover in the next couple of decades is going to fundamentally transform the way that we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness.
The new book is
going to change the way we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness. In fact, he's very right there. It's going to provide a new religion, a new explanation of who we are. Adam and Eve. Now that wasn't, they weren't, it's not like the Bible said, you know, it was these creatures from way out there. There's big problems here, folks. All right, so let's go to, in other words, the UFO phenomena, the UFO narrative, all of this is a burgeoning new religion. It's not a new religion. It's the same old religion. It's essentially Gnosticism, the first Christian heresy, secret knowledge, right? They worship secret knowledge, the thing that could be. And you heard him there make an appeal to future science, right? It's this old thing, this old God of the gaps theory. Whatever Christians can't understand, they just say God did it. They insert God into the gap. Well, that's not what the God of the gaps argument was all about. It was really more about the future science of the gaps argument, right? Well, we're going to figure it out one day, and we're going to know. We're going to prove God doesn't exist. We're going to prove that aliens are out there. So if we go over to Garrett Graff's Twitter feed for a moment, you can once again see that he's a historian and journalist, contributor at Wired, Politico, Washingtonian. Another interview that he's done on his new book. But listen to this. New on That Trip Show, a podcast with Joe Trippi he was on. Garrett Graff was there for an interesting conversation on how the U.S. government's history of UFO cover-ups in the past influenced the rise of MAGA conspiracies today. And isn't that interesting? So you know what, clearly you know what this is about, right? This is going to be that the UFO narrative is what fueled the Q movement. That's what that's going to be about, right? That kind of thinking. You see lots of praise for the book. The author of the excellent books Raven Rock, Watergate, And Watergate asked whether the truth is really out there and what the government does and does not know about UAPs. A fun and diversionary read that is, thus far, superbly written. Joe Trippi said, my jaw dropped when interviewing Garrett Graff about his book. That aha moment when he connects UFO conspiracies to the building blocks of Trump and MAGA. How about that? How UFO conspiracies connect to J6. You see what's happening here, folks? Are you on board with me? Do you see what we've got going on here? We've got another false category in which to throw all of the people who don't go along with the official narrative. Let's jump over here to Stephen Greenstreet's page now. Now, Greenstreet has done an excellent job in covering the UFO field, the whole thing. He says a new UFO book is currently on a heavy publicity tour, breathlessly being promoted by mainstream news media. The book contains inaccuracies and unfounded claims, but the media hasn't noticed because facts don't matter to the media when it comes to UFOs or anything else. Greenstreet says, so allow me to point out a few examples and feel free to correct me. All right, so right here the author claims that about what UFOs actually are, a series of classified Pentagon projects in the 2000s and 2010s sponsored by Harry Reid and run by Las Vegas business titan Robert Bigelow, known as the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, ATIP. So first reported by Politico and the New York Times. Wrong. The author, Garrett, goodness, I already forgot his name. Garrett Graff. Yeah, so Garrett Graff gets it wrong here. He asserts that a series of classified Pentagon UFO projects, plural, ran through the 2000s and 2010s. There is no evidence of this. There is no evidence that there was a series of projects over this 20-year period. There's also no evidence that ALSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, was compiled of, quote, a series of classified Pentagon projects. Not the case. Not the case. There's also no evidence ALSAP was classified. In fact, it was mostly made up of unclassified reports. There's also no evidence ALSAP was a Pentagon UFO program. Right? The book makes a claim ALSAP is a UFO program. No evidence of that. No evidence of that. Greenstreet has covered this now for several years since he made his transition to the truth on this topic. The author also states the New York Times and Politico reported about ALSAP in 2017. This is false. It simply didn't happen. There's no mention of ALSAP in either of those news articles. So what's going on here? Where is Graff? Yeah, what is he doing? What is this guy doing? I think we know what he's doing. He's given the official version of history or creating some new narrative. All right, here's another example. Lakatsky tried, this is another name in the UFO field, unsuccessfully at one point to shift the program to DHS, Homeland Security. Final reports trickled in through 2011, and although the ALSAP had generated more than 100 reports and 11 databases for the DIA, well, there only exists one piece of documented evidence that involves DHS and the spooky Bigelow space ghost stuff. But that document, one single page, says BAASS, not ALSAP. There's no evidence. Lakatsky tried to, quote, shift the program to DHS, adding he claimed he would be more journalistically sound, right? So there's no evidence ALSAP was still sending reports to DIA in 2011. There's no evidence that ALSAP generated more than 100 reports. There's no evidence that ALSAP created 11 databases for the DIA. On down here too in the fall of 2017, months after the fall of ALSAP, again, Leslie Kean got a strange invitation. Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, wanted to meet at a hotel bar near the Pentagon. Let's see, and then on October 4th, she was introduced to a man named Luis Elizondo, who explained that until weeks earlier, he had headed up another Pentagon effort to study UFOs. That's false. Elizondo was not there. This assumes there were two UFO study groups or classified. Kean was shocked. For years, the Pentagon had been doing the very work she had been lobbying policymakers to support. Wrong. It's just flat out false. The government was not doing this. Over a 3-hour conversation, Elizondo outlined his work, his program known as ATIP. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, had been separate from Bigelow's research project. Wrong. First of all, OSAP ended mere months before the fall of 2017. Department of Defense claims it shut down in 2012. Members of the program claim it essentially shut down in 2010 and officially shut down in 2012. So there's no evidence to support it ending in 2017 at all. And the author offers no evidence to support his claim. Again, folks, what is this guy doing? He's writing official history. Let's see. While Lou Elizondo might have chased UFOs on his own at the Pentagon, there's no evidence showing that his UFO efforts were sanctioned and organized by the Pentagon. It was not a, quote, Pentagon effort. You see, this is why we have to be very careful. You've got this guy who is, well, he's very clean cut, right? He's academic, well spoken, but he's wrong. But he doesn't do good research. But he doesn't support his claims. He's just offering what he or his publisher or someone else wants you to believe is the real story. Also, Lou Elizondo was not the director of a Pentagon UFO program called ATIP. In fact, ATIP, I think the truth is ATIP, as that acronym goes, it doesn't even exist. Never did exist. Anyway, whether or not that's the claim, we've got more. Inside the military, Elizondo had collected 3 videos of UAP encounters, including one depicting the Nimitz Tic Tac incident, and gotten them declassified for release. And as the fall unfolded, he, Tom DeLonge, Blink-182, and Mellon decided to share it. So this is interesting and should raise some eyebrows to those who've been paying attention. The author not only claims Elizondo played a role in getting these 3 videos from the Pentagon and publicly releasing them, but also that Elizondo used the unauthorized videos as a bargaining tool to get his UFO story printed in the New York Times. Elizondo himself has emphatically claimed that he had nothing to do with the unauthorized release of the 3 videos. The author makes no mention of this, nor does he include a response from Lou Elizondo. The second part here, Mellon and Elizondo told Leslie Kean they'd pass her the videos if she could get a piece published in the New York Times. Well, should be noted that Chris Mellon does seem to support the author's version of things. Elizondo played a role in the video's unauthorized release. It says here, as you can see above, there are multiple factual inaccuracies and unfounded claims in this new UFO book that the media has embraced. And if the author is wrong about these things, what else is he wrong about? Also goes on, here's another person in the thread helping out, said ATIP was never a funded program to begin with. That's an easy fact to find out. ATIP was not a funded program. And this comes out of the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, George Knapp and can't remember who else the other guy. So what OSAP was doing, you might be asking, well, if it was there, what were they? They were just looking at supernatural phenomenon on the Skinwalker Ranch. This is what Leslie Kean left out of that 2017 New York Times article, right? This so-called research and study into extraterrestrials and UFOs was never that. $22 million, I believe it was, Harry Reid from New Mexico, senator, secured $22 million in funding for business titan Robert Bigelow, who at the time owned Skinwalker Ranch. And that's what the study was, that's what the money was, that's what they did with the money. They might have been telling Congress that this was for national security. We're going to study these phenomena, but that's not what they did with the money. They went and studied supernatural phenomena on the Skinwalker Ranch. And it gets crazy if you see the videos Greenstreet's done about this. And you'll see that Greenstreet gets quite a bit of pushback too. Bro, you're reaching so bad. WTF, LMAO. Right? Well, there's a good argument. Do you think Jim Lukatsky is lying? Stephen, I just don't see your point here. It's lazy journalism on their part. Well, at best, it's lazy journalism. At worst, this is a false narrative intended to lead somebody down the garden path. Greenstreet, you simply reek of desperation. Here's the article. Crazy UFO believing Pentagon bosses missed spycraft for years. This is a very good article at NewYorkPost.com written by Greenstreet. And this is the only guy out there that there are others, but this is the one I've seen the most, who's really covering this topic accurately, just following the evidence where it leads. Leslie Kean talks about how UFOs could be connected to the afterlife, to near-death experiences, and could come from another dimension. Heaven, hell. This mirrors the beliefs of Skinwalker Ranch ghost hunters and the teachings of the Mormon faith. It's crazy town all the way down. Leslie Kean single-handedly started a domino effect of hysteria within the U.S. government with her false and deceptive 2017 New York Times story and her unfounded 2023 UFO whistleblower story. That was David Grush. You know, she was the one who broke the Grush story too at the debrief. Now, a clueless and credulous U.S. Congress is creating new laws based on false information that Kean published and promoted. Now, the reason Leslie Kean did this is because she is a UFO activist. She's not a journalist. She's a UFO activist. She doesn't really, and she said as much. Certainly, we showed you in one of the other UFO shows that we did recently that she admitted it in an interview where, she left out the Skinwalker Ranch stuff because she wanted the story to be taken seriously. That's what they were funding. They were funding research at Skinwalker Ranch. They weren't funding any such UFO studies. Even though that's what Harry Reid told them the funding was for. He was doing that for his friends.
The more paranormal elements of the UFO phenomenon seem to have some relationship to what people describe in near-death experiences and other types of activities that take place in terms of just consciousness-related anomalous experiences that people have, which are very varied. There just is some kind of crossover there, and I don't know what it is. I mean,
well, interesting. She sure makes a lot of truth claims about UFOs, to not be so sure about this, because this is the most important point of all. What is the actual origin of this phenomenon? You know, the unexplained part of it. And that's where we can get into big trouble. Look at this piece right here. Fanatical UFO activist Ross Coulthart. Remember, Ross Coulthart is the guy, if you remember this video we showed you here, he is the guy who did the interview with Grush. Right here. There he is. So you can see there's There he is. There's Ross Coulthart. He's the one who was interviewing Grush. He says that anyone who's covering up UFOs or whoever's not going along with this narrative, if you're not supportive of this disclosure, you need to be tarred and feathered and dragged around Washington, D.C. and stoned behind a Humvee. Coulthart was recently hired by News Nation to be an investigative journalist. He's not an investigative journalist. You saw that in his interview with David Grush. He asked no follow-up questions. UFO activists seem to threaten war and insurrection if wacky flying saucer legislation isn't passed by Congress. They blame people like Mike Rogers from Alabama and Mike Turner on down for proposed UFO laws being on the chopping block. Yeah, so they're mad because they're not getting the UFO legislation they wanted. Interesting stuff. All right. So is it important? Is it dangerous? Is there a problem here? What is it just well, look at this. Here's another one. Matt Ford, who hosts a UFO late night talk show. He goes, yes, that's a thing in 2023. Claims he thought about UFOs so much that, quote, hitchhiker ghosts started to haunt his house. The hitchhiker, quote unquote, hitchhiker was coined by Skinwalker Ranch ghost hunters. There you go. This should be the clip here.
This would have been beginning of 2022. Anyway, right around that time, I began having extensive conversations with Robert Hastings. And at that point, about 2 days later, some weird paranormal stuff started happening in the house. And shortly thereafter, orbs began showing up above my house. And we've had, not neighbors, but friends of ours witness it, my wife. And it has continued to this day. The last significant orb appeared above our home. I wasn't there to witness it. My wife and a friend of ours that was very alarmed by it witnessed it. So it's continued. But the point I was making to Chris Mellon is, being someone that has never experienced any of this his entire life, and the same thing for my wife, the only thing that I could kind of surmise was it was due to me beginning to looking into it, or as part of the hitchhiker effect. Robert Hastings has always said it was probably the hitchhiker effect. But one of the questions I was talking to Chris about is, let's say that what has been showing up on a continual basis above my home is due to kind of mentally engaging and thinking about this thing.
So the idea here is that this is from a secular perspective, I guess. He's trying to understand the unseen realm. And the assumption being that if I engage it, it might cause it to ramp up or be more present. Well, all of this finds its origin. All of this common narrative now that you see comes out of the 2017 New York Times article. That was just hooey. Most of that article is erroneous. It's factually inaccurate, deceptive. Leslie Keene actually went on a Showtime documentary and admitted that she had a specific goal and agenda with that New York Times article, and that was to get people to believe in UFOs. Now, they went out on the debrief and they brought Grush ahead, and a lot of other media outlets turned it down, and that's because, there was no story. There was no corroborating evidence. It were just Grush's claims. So the debrief, a low-level underground media outlet that runs lots of UFO stories. They got their start running UFO stories, endless UFO stories about any UFO claim that was made. And they became the repository for speculative, impossible things. But the lack of any evidence whatsoever has not stopped the fakes, the frauds, and the grifters from running with it like O.J. Simpson down the 405. Most people who come forward with dramatic alien stories, including whistleblowers, claim to have firsthand knowledge about ET visitors. David Grush is an atypical whistleblower. Grush has no firsthand information about anything. All his statements were based on secondhand information, allegedly relayed to him from other people. And let's be clear, it is definitely Grush's testimony in this new wave of narrative that has led to this new book. And this guy out there just sort of spinning a yarn. All right, we've pointed out half a dozen different ways where his story is just factually inaccurate, and these are not small points. To make a claim that the Pentagon had a program called this and it studied this, and then to find out that after that your claim is wrong, the Pentagon actually didn't have a program called this, and the program that they had that was studying anything wasn't even studying UFOs. Well, that's a problem. Of course, we have here for you David Icke. Just for a moment. But David Grush explained his sources like this. He would make a quote, and he would say, he said, people started to confide in me. They approached me. I have plenty of senior former intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me, that they were part of a program, unquote, right? No names, nothing to follow up on at all. And in the hearing, he said, that's the kind of thing we'll have to get into behind closed doors. He has seen no documents. He has seen no evidence. And Garrett Graff, same thing. But that's the story. These world-class journalists, who wrote the story for the debrief, weren't concerned about the lack of photographs or documents. The information was supposed to be classified. I guess that explains why it was unavailable. Isn't that convenient? These people reporting the story do not care about evidence in what they call the most bombshell case about the most significant story in the history of the world. There's absolutely no proof of any of his claims, but talking about Grush here. But people should believe him anyway, because Garrett Graff has now written an official history of this movement. So let's see here. I just want to give you just a bit of David Icke here too, because this is ultimately spiritual. This is religion, right? There is a new. It's not a new religion, but it is a UFO religion, and it is taking shape in the U.S.
When I started looking around these different ancient cultures and religions, one of the things that strikes me as I've researched this over the years is not how things are so different, but it's the things that people agree on. It's the things that are the same. I'm always looking for patterns of agreement over the eons of what we call time. And you find, whether you're looking at religions or whether you're looking at ancient cultures, you'll find there is this agreement. This reality, this world we call human, is manipulated from the unseen. These are the pantheons of gods, like the Greek gods and all these other gods that
So that's interesting, right? That's a true statement. I want to get to the point here about the religions.
Is operating outside of visible light. Say it's a UFO or an entity. When it enters visible light, to the observer, it's come out of nowhere. It hasn't, but it's come into your.
So David Icke here is trying to discuss how dimensions, other dimensions work, but that's not what we're interested in here. If I can get to the religion part.
It is so people think, but actually there are big areas of agreement, and one of them is the jinn.
Here we go.
Satan, that's their name for this.
All the religions are the same.
Visual reality out of nowhere, and when it leaves, it's gone out of your visual reality. I started looking at this and doing all the ancient cultures and the religions, and you find this theme of a non-human force with negative intent on humanity that is manipulating our world from the unseen. So if you look at Christianity, they have the devil and Satan. That's their name for this force collectively. And they talk about demons. Then you look at Islam. Now, Islam, of course, is completely different from Christianity. Of course, it is, so people think. But actually, there are big areas of agreement. And one of them is the jinn. And the jinn are considered to be a force in the hidden that manipulate human society. And their collective name for the ruler of the jinn, Christian, Satan. Islam, Shaitan, or Iblis. Then you...
This is because of the crossover in the languages. All right.
You look at...
Islam is essentially, it's best described as a Christian heresy. It comes along in the 7th century, 600s. We're talking about 600 years after the fact. So it's more of a Christian heresy. It's not the same Jesus. Many will try to assert that the God that's mentioned, Allah, which is mentioned in Islam, is the same God as Christians, but no, it's not. There's no triunity. Basically, Islam is sort of a Unitarian. I guess it's more accurately a Unitarian type religion. But look at the video, watch the video we did with Daniel Apologetics a couple weeks ago about this topic to answer all of these questions. But I just wanted to cover this, to check this out from let's see, we've got more. He talks about low vibrational beings, the royal bloodlines, goes into Diana and the occult, visions, worshiping the wrong God.
But so many of the religions are worshipping the wrong, quote, chap. The bloodthirsty, arrogant tyrant of a god described in the Old Testament is the demons. And I think a lot of these gods that people worship, or their version of God in the different religions, are actually this demonic realm. And
now that is, it is certainly the case that many religions false religions, are worshiping, something demonic. But David Icke here is speaking from ignorance. He doesn't really know the Old Testament at all to try to make the claim that God, as depicted in the Old Testament, is somehow brutal and demonic. This was common to the first Christian heresy, Gnosticism, where the idea was that the creator God was this overarching source, this force, that created other demigods, the Old Testament God then is this demiurge, this evil, just aggravated, sort of autistic and angry deity or sub-deity that created the earth and the universe and created flesh, the physical realm. And so in Gnosticism, the idea is to evolve out of the flesh, to ascend out of the flesh, to ascend beyond the flesh. And that is something that you do through the process of acquiring and appropriating hidden knowledge. And that's what David Icke is. He's sort of a Gnostic, and many people are, because the idea that somehow or another exposing darkness is how one is saved today, that's a Gnostic idea. The whole flat earth cult is a Gnostic cult. Satan is described by the Apostle Peter, 1 Peter 5, as a roaring lion who is prowling around the world, seeking and devouring whomever he can. Whomever he can, meaning that there are some he cannot devour, some that he cannot possess and destroy. In other words, Satan is a lion, yes, but Satan is he's a beast on a leash, a beast that has already been defeated. Even the demons have a perfect theology. Even the demons know exactly who Christ is. Even the demons know exactly who human creatures are. And they know that they're bound for hell. UFO researchers explain how the UFO topic is ultimately a spiritual endeavor, especially Mormons. UFOs, now when we think about UFOs for a minute here, UFOs are just objects in the sky that are not yet identified, which can include various natural and human-made objects, of course. Once identified, a UFO becomes an IFO. It becomes an identified flying object. So the term flying saucer, on the other hand, is typically used to refer to a physical spacecraft that is believed to be piloted by aliens, or it could be sort of some type of a drone ship. But aliens who are also known as extraterrestrials. The existence of extraterrestrial life is tied to the discovery of other planets, which are planets orbiting other stars. Since the mid-1990s, nearly 2,000 extrasolar planets have been discovered. So there, Garrett Graff, correct about that point, suggesting that such planets might be common. And then he took that argument, the fact that habitable planets might be common in the universe, to then extrapolate from that life in the universe is very common. It doesn't follow. The argument for extraterrestrial life often relies on probabilities, right? And you heard Graff say that, considering the vast number of stars and potentially habitable planets in the universe. However, the text also introduces a theological perspective, particularly from a biblical viewpoint. It argues that since life on earth was created by God, the existence of life elsewhere would also require divine creation. This perspective views the existence of ET life as a significant theological question rather than a purely scientific question. So this raises serious implications for beliefs about the universe and creation. That's why this is important. That's why you heard Leslie Kean speaking a minute ago about how there's a lot of this that kind of crosses over with near-death experiences or have implications for the afterlife. From 1947 to the present, let's see if I have any more clips for you. Let's listen to Daniel for a moment as we think about, are all religions, basically the same?
All religions are the same, no? Doesn't all religions teach the same? They all lead up to the mountain where God is. All religions are the same. This is quite ignorant slogan from pop culture, but popular. Because Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism are all fundamentally very different. Even Judaism, because just as Islam, they reject the deity and resurrection of Jesus, which is a fundamental core Orthodox Christian belief. God, life, sin, death, and salvation. On all these 5 points, all religions make exclusive truth claims that contradict each other.
And there you go. Daniel has nailed it, dealing with what David Icke here had to say. The religions, the world religions couldn't be more dissimilar. They're not all basically the same. They don't all worship the same God. They all make specific truth claims. And the truth claims made by each world religion butt heads. When it comes down to the most important parts, they don't agree. For example, who is God? Islam and Christianity do not agree. While Judaism and Islam agree a little more. What about Jesus? No other religion affirms Jesus Christ as Lord, as Emmanuel, as God with us, as God come into the world, fully man, fully God, and as Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, will be forever in this glorified human form, fully God, fully man, and at And when we are glorified and transformed, we will see him as he is. We'll be like he is. We'll be glorified in that sense. There's no other religion. They're not the same. But a little bit of history from 1947, Roswell incident. We also have the Kenneth Arnold event where the term flying saucer is coined. From 1947 to the present, an interesting shift has occurred in Americans' belief systems or worldviews. This is known as the UFO age, I'll just call it. Over a 70-plus year period, enthusiasm and interest for UFOs and alien contact has steadily risen. More and more people have come to accept and promote the existence of extraterrestrial biological entities. Now, at the same time as all of this has been happening, over the same period, interest in the Bible and those who profess faith in Christ and are members of a local body of believers has severely declined. So as UFO interest rises, interest in Christianity drops. Pew Research began keeping stats on the faith of Americans back in the 1930s, and their data shows that from about 1940 to today, Americans' belief systems, including those who still profess to follow Christ, have fragmented into various shards of mystic and Gnostic ideologies, New Age, New Thought, mysticism, transcendental meditation, yoga, and more. And as a logical progression from these, well, now occultism has become extremely popular, and even certain forms of Satanism are just welcomed, even in schools. 50 years after Kenneth Arnold, 50 years after Roswell, a poll from CNN, Time Magazine, revealed that 80% of Americans believed the government was covering up the existence of alien life forms that had visited Earth. According to Gallup, the two groups most inclined to believe in extraterrestrial life are Americans under 30 and men. So, but what's the problem, right? It's just fun, right? Even if you don't believe it, it's just fun, right? We're just having a little fun. Well, the Bible consistently condemns bearing false witness as a grievous sin. It's highlighted in the Ten Commandments as you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, Exodus 20:16. And it's linked, this kind of lying, bearing false witness, twisting it around, is linked to wickedness, violence, and discord. Exodus 23, Psalm 27, Proverbs 6. Bearing false witness is compared to a harmful weapon, Proverbs 25:18. Examples include making a false accusation. For example, in the scripture, making a false accusation against David, against Jesus, against Stephen, in the story of Naboth, who was unjustly killed due to a false testimony, 1 Kings 21. So these acts of falsehood stem from a sinful human heart, which can only be remedied by receiving a new heart from God, Ezekiel 36:26. The transformation through Christ leads to truthfulness, contrasting the sinful nature of bearing false witness, Ephesians 4:22-25. Proverbs 6:16-19 sums up God's abhorrence of lying and false testimony. Now, at the same time, we have in the late 19th century, the late 1800s, the birth of tabloid journalism, which is the art of lying for gain. Print, news, and magazines were first made widely available to the masses in the late 1800s. Media tycoons Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst engaged in a circulation war to outsell one another. They went to outsell their newspapers. So the policy of selling as many copies as possible brought about the age of what was called yellow journalism, a style of reporting that emphasized sensational and often misleading headlines, extravagant stories, and exaggerations over accuracy and objectivity. Illustrations, cartoons, and caricatures were common, and they were put there to catch the eye of passersby at the newsstand, often advertising scandalous topics and mysterious events and things that never happened. Today we call this clickbait, or we might call it tabloid journalism. But today, we call this This is clickbait, right? A famous example of early 20th century tabloid journalism is the reporting on the sinking of the USS Maine in 1898, which was used to fan the flames of public sentiment in favor of the Spanish-American War. The false flag, and the media cooperating in a false flag. The same tactic has been used time and time again to manipulate public opinion and then to support the declaration of war to cause a singular mass reaction to a problem for which the solution has already been devised. So does anything recent come to mind when we talk about that? While the authenticity of some of these UFO incidents are debatable and great, we were talking here about the Aurora UFO. This was back in the 1800s when the airship, the lighter-than airship, the dirigible, or what we call blimps today, that technology was brand new. When people saw these things flying around, it was unusual. There wasn't really a lot of social media or TV for people to know that these things were available. So if you saw one of these things flying around, it might shock you a bit. But while the authenticity of the Aurora, Texas, I believe it's Texas, UFO incident remains a matter of debate, and the great airship wave of the 1800s can be explained by actual new inventions or elaborate hoaxes using the new technology, the story continues to be a fascinating part of Texas folklore and has earned its place in American mythology. But these early documented reports of strange objects in the sky were not particularly concerned about beings from another world. That wasn't the concern yet, right? As aliens began to evolve in the public mind, at first they were living on the backside of the moon. And then as we learn more about the solar system, now they live out on Venus. Well, we realize it's just too hot. Nothing can live on Venus. So they have to live on, it must be Mars. So it's Mars. And I got tired and old, so now they're other places. They're other galaxies. The modern concept of UFOs belonging to the extraterrestrial non-human entities emerged much later in the 20th century with the increased interest in flying saucers after 1947, and with the advent of science fiction literature, and of course Hollywood's influence through movies. So this general timeline of the modern UFO alien narrative in America again begins in 1947 in June when businessman Kenneth Arnold was flying his private plane in the Pacific Northwest near Mount Rainier in the state of Washington when he spotted a formation of 9 high-speed objects in the sky, and he described their motion as saucer-like, like something skipping across the water, flat, disc shape, which led to the popularization of the term flying saucer. Now, when Arnold reported this, he claimed that at one point during the encounter, the objects covered a distance of about 50 miles in a minute. That translates to 3,000 miles per hour. So the story quickly gained widespread media attention, becoming the first widely publicized UFO report in America. There were reports of UFOs and strange sightings before this incident, as we talked about the airship wave in the 1800s, but Arnold's sighting had a significant impact on public awareness. The media reports triggered a wave of UFO sightings and speculations. Now add into that Hollywood's alien narrative to the mix and the modern public fascination with UFOs and alien invasions. Well, it's unstoppable. Only 8 days after the Kenneth Arnold sighting occurred, what is likely the most famous or infamous event in modern UFO lore took place. According to the reports, at some point between the evening of Wednesday, July 2nd, and early morning of Thursday, July 3rd, 1947, rancher W.W. Mac Brazel discovered debris of an unidentified object that crashed on his property about 75 miles north of Roswell, New Mexico. And then, as the story goes, on July 7th, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating that they had recovered a flying disc. And the story quickly made national headlines. And the next day, the Roswell base issued another press release stating that no, it was just a weather balloon. But the Roswell incident faded into near obscurity until the late 70s when UFO researchers revived interest in the case. Stanton Friedman, Dr. Donald R. Schmidt, Kevin D. Randall were some of the first to write on it. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a report titled The Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert, which attempted to debunk the UFO theories surrounding the incident and explained the debris as part of a top-secret government project called Project Mogul. Project Mogul was used high-altitude balloons to monitor Soviet nuclear testing. Remember, this is right after World War II. This is at the beginning of the Cold War. And so the most likely explanation for what happened in Roswell is, if you read Annie Jacobson's work on this, with her interviews, it's most likely that what crashed in New Mexico, if something crashed at all, most likely what it was a drone ship that was dropped out of a high altitude plane that had surgically altered children in it. And the origin of this was Soviet. It was from what we would call Russia. Could have been for many reasons. One of them could have been to see how long it would take for that to hit the news and what would the news be, right? So it kind of makes sense that at first the Army would report a flying disc, and then a day later come back and change it, hoping that, they wouldn't be had by Joseph Stalin. Get out there and change that report. We don't want Joseph Stalin to believe that he caught us, that he got us, to fall for it. Who knows? Maybe that's not true, but that is the most likely explanation. That there's no reason to assume that anything in our atmosphere should be of an off-world origin. Hollywood sorcery, combined with the active imaginations of post-war Americans and the early implications of the space race between America and the Soviet Union, fueled this business of UFO marketing and the genre of UFO speculation. Speculation because today there has never been a single piece of physical evidence provided beyond conjecture and the passing down of stories in it's like American mythology. After World War II, the military and technological rivalry that grew between the Soviet Union and the U.S. fueled the launch of one of the most popular paranormal subjects of all times, aliens and UFOs. After the war, the Soviet and American governments detained the German scientists of the Third Reich who were responsible for significant advances in technology and rocketry. For example, rocket scientist and engineer Wernher von Braun was a significant factor in the American space program that yielded the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. Also, the American government and military profited from the brilliant but depraved minds of men like Joseph Goebbels, Dr. Joseph Mengele, and their boundaryless immoral advances in the medical experimentation and psychology of individual and mass mind control. And so the Roswell incident seems to be where the disclosure movement that's talked about today truly began. However, the truth about Roswell is not necessarily unknown, but a lack of evidence has never deterred true believers, quote unquote, those who are true believers in our alien saviors. 1948, Project Blue Book was established as an official government program to investigate reports of UFOs. 1952, in July, a series of UFO sightings over the Capitol, Washington, D.C., including radar visual confirmation, leads to widespread media coverage and public interest in UFOs. Keep in mind, this is the time when the Nazi scientists had been divvied up between the Soviet Union and the U.S., and experiments are rampant, right? The CIA in 1953 initiated the Robertson Panel, a group of scientists who evaluated the UFO phenomenon. The panel concludes that, remember, no one has studied aliens yet. They're studying what's actually they see flying around. The panel concluded that the UFO sightings do not pose a direct threat, but recommends debunking UFO reports to reduce public interest. Why, you might say, why are they covering it up? Well, because these two nations, these two superpowers are going back and forth trying to fool one another, trying to get into each other's airspace and spy. So they don't want the other side to know that they're being successful. And by letting it get out into the news that a disc had crashed in New Mexico, well, Joseph Stalin sees immediately that he won that round. So they don't want that to happen. Though Area 51 was established in 1955, the mystery began sometime in the 80s when a man claiming to have been employed there said he saw scientists engineer an alien aircraft, which some believe was modeled after a UFO that had crashed in Roswell in 1947. The man's story was later proven false as it was discovered that the alleged alien saucer turned out to be an advanced weather balloon again. I don't know if I believe that or not, but that's the story. But lack of evidence, again, has not dissuaded Americans from believing in these otherworldly neighbors. Moving ahead to 2019, a Facebook event called Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us, had nearly 365,000 confirmed attendees and some 384,000 interested in the mission on Facebook. Facebook removed the event. I suppose a couple 100,000 motivated disciples of alien lore showing up at an actual top secret government installation is a bridge too far for the federal propagandists. They didn't want to take it that far. But Roswell, the site of the supposed UFO crash in 1947, that started the disclosure movement we see today, and it still draws thousands. The conference that's held there in Roswell every year. Ufologists, speakers, and authors today are getting top-level speakers' fees on the UFO paranormal conference circuit. So why? Who is this guy, and why is he interested in this? Well, because it's worth his time to write about this, right? And also, as we've shown, he is an official approved narrative writer. Move ahead to 1966 and 1968, the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, which investigated UFO sightings, not aliens. Pentagon has never had a program studying aliens, but Project Blue Book investigated UFO sightings. And the whole project concluded, official story anyway, without finding any evidence of extraterrestrial activity. Project was officially terminated in 1969. Eric von Daniken published his book, Chariots of the Gods, in 1969, 68, I think it was. This is the origin of the ancient aliens hypothesis, theory, shows, phenomenon, unsolved mysteries of the past, where the former hotel manager, von Daniken, claims that the technologies and religions of many ancient civilizations were so similar, had so many things in common, that these religions must have been given to the people by ancient astronauts who were welcomed as gods. In 1977, the release of Steven Spielberg's blockbuster film Close Encounters of the Third Kind sparked renewed public interest in UFOs and ET encounters. The film's plot introduced the idea of alien visitors who are here to help rather than invaders here to abduct and destroy. So this is where we see the tide start to shift with Close Encounters, Steven Spielberg, away from monsters, aliens being monsters, Martians being monsters, to wait a minute, maybe they're cosmic saviors. They're going to deliver us from our suffering. It's funny because, this also, 1977 also seems to coincide very well with the rise of the New Age movement, right? This is about the time when the idea of personal godhood becomes a thing. Spielberg presented a more optimistic, awe-inspiring version of aliens, that aligned with the spiritual notions of this expanding New Age movement in America, specifically emphasizing the communication with the other side, the unseen realm, or I guess in this case, the UFO, the seen realm. 1997, The Phoenix Lights incident occurred when thousands of witnesses reported seeing something over Phoenix, Arizona. Something in the shape of a V-shaped lights, a formation of lights in a consistent V-shape. It looked like one craft. And that sparked significant media attention and public curiosity. It was a strange event, one of the strangest events, probably one of the best UFO stories or encounters, reports that's ever been. No reason to think it's alien. No reason to think it's off-world, but it certainly was striking. The size of the thing. It had to be more than a mile in diameter from tip to tip if you consider the delta-shaped wings. 2004, this brings us up to almost current now. The Nimitz UFO incident became popular when radar operators and fighter pilots from the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier reported encounters with unidentified aerial objects off the coast of California. That was one of the pilots that was beside Grush at the hearing. Was there for that. And then 2017, the New York Times published an article revealing the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, a secret UFO investigation program funded by the U.S. government from 2007 to 2012. Again, that's what the story revealed. That's not altogether true. You can check that out. That the 2007 article it's out there. And then 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense officially declassified and released 3 Navy videos showing encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, which are well known now. And in 2021, the U.S. Congress requested a report from the Director of National Intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena. And that was later released in June. Big nothing burger, not much there. The report, though, acknowledged the existence of these encounters, but didn't provide any conclusive evidence to their origin. I think it's most likely that this is all there to cover up some new technology, some new surveillance or drone system that we have. So throughout this timeline, various media outlets continue to report on UFO sightings, the encounters, government investigations, and public interest in the UFO subject has remained steady until the last few years, and now it's really starting to take off. You've got numerous documentaries, books, online discussions contributing to this fascination with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. And as the decades marched on, Hollywood continues to infuse the public mind with alien UFO themes. The space age, with the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, also played a large role in this transformation. All of this works together to stoke the interest. And when you get a rebellious mind who wants to find an alternative explanation for existence, this is a very helpful narrative for the rebellious mind. In the 80s and 90s, out of Hollywood, you saw a mix of blockbuster hits, cult classics ranging from E.T., Extra-Terrestrial 1982 to Independence Day in 1996. And these films often portrayed aliens as either benevolent visitors or menacing invaders, and they contributed to shaping the public's perception of UFOs and ET life. As technologically advanced, the 21st century brought a new wave of UFO and alien-themed films, often featuring elaborate special effects. They drifted over into the horror genre a little more with movies like Alien. And so Hollywood has explored the subject through various TV shows and documentaries as well, adding to the diverse representations of UFOs and aliens in popular media, whereas today we have all kinds of explanations for what ETs might be. Overall, Hollywood's portrayal of UFOs and aliens has evolved, but it reflects the cultural shift that we see in America, the scientific discoveries, changing perspectives on the possibilities of extraterrestrial life. To the point we are today, which is 2023, most Americans not only believe that aliens exist, but they believe that they're benevolent and that they're our saviors. They're coming to help us. Most Americans believe this. God sent his only begotten Son God incarnate, God in the flesh, to save mankind and redeem creation. Does that redemption include life on other planets? When John 3:16 is translated as only begotten, God gave his only begotten son. Does only begotten mean only physical representation, or is it even more limited, referring only to the human species? Right? Remember, Jesus Christ is fully God and fully man. He's fully human and fully God. Right? He has blood. It's his shed blood that cleanses us. If there's an alien somewhere else in the universe, doesn't have blood, has something else, how is it applied? Leviticus 17:11 says that human life is in the blood. Where is the life of these hypothetical aliens? And what would have to be sacrificed to atone for their sins? Could the shedding of Jesus' human blood save creatures that are not carbon-based? Or creatures who don't have human blood, how are they saved? Well, we know that angels do not have access to the gracious, cleansing blood of Christ. Right? When the angels fell, they stayed fallen. There is no redemption for the angels. So think about that. Isn't that interesting? God comes into the world, the man, Jesus Christ, fully man, fully God. Human blood. And it's that blood, symbolically in the scriptures, it's that blood now that washes us clean. We're washed clean by the blood of the Lamb. Well, angels don't have access to that, and they don't have physical bodies. So let's apply that on out. Aliens are interdimensional. They're ultra-terrestrials. Do they exist? Are they aliens? Are they from other planets? Or are we talking about demons here? God the Father is spirit. He has no physical body. So to be created in God's image means to carry certain non-physical traits that God also possesses, like rationality, morality, and sociability. Would aliens, if they exist, embody these same characteristics? Another major point of contention with the extraterrestrial hypothesis here is that there can be no life without God's blessing of life, right? This is the spirit, the ruach, or the pneuma in the Greek. The spirit, it's which God breathed into Adam, creating human life. The Bible does not mention any such parallel physical civilizations. So we can explain this so-called alien activity on Earth, right? In the Christian worldview, we have categories, valid categories. We have stable definitions so that we can live in the truth. And our worldview knows what to do with these experiences, knows what to do with this phenomenon. We can explain it. The reports of UFOs often describe craft or beings that are ethereal, transient, deceptive, and sometimes good, sometimes saviors, sometimes evil and malevolent. So we also know that an encounter with these beings can be stopped by a sincere call out to Jesus Christ. The name of Christ will stop an alien abduction. So, all of this is well within the Bible's explanatory scope. But it falls in the Bible's explanatory scope of demons. It's also plausible that the strong or the powerful delusion, depending on your translation, that Paul describes in 2 Thessalonians 2:11, it's possible that that would be something much like the alien abduction theory, right? It's a false teaching meant to lead people away from God's truth about the return of Jesus Christ. So the discovery of alien life, the quote-unquote discovery of alien life, if if the Pentagon was to report tomorrow and they let it out through CNN that alien life has been found, if SETI suddenly had all this evidence that there are aliens out there, that would have no effect on true biblical Christianity. What should we be thinking about this? Well, first of all, in science, we can think about it scientifically. There has never been a single contact with any extraterrestrial, at least not physically, okay? In 1900, the French Academy of Science offered a prize of 100,000 francs for the first person to make contact with an alien civilization, except if the alien was from Mars. That wouldn't count, because the Academy in that day was convinced that the Martian civilization was a fact. This is just scientific accepted fact. Since then, not a trace of little green men, or indeed any life, has been found apart from microbial. But still, a great number of astronomers, we're not talking about the wackos on the fringe, we're talking about astronomers, a lot of them today, still think that since life evolved here on Earth, that it must surely have evolved near one of these other many stars out there, right? So there's an example of a logical inference that's just false. SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which we've tried to debunk many times here, their researchers have scanned the sky for 50 years looking in vain for signals from intelligent beings. They've found nothing. Life on any planet can only survive in the presence of a great number of very stringent requirements. These are the tolerances for life. And when you study this, you come to find out that the universe is designed and the universe was created for us. God has created this for us. For example, to survive, a habitable planet must be at the right distance from its sun. Can't be too close, can't be too far away, because it can't be too hot or too cold. So so-called habitable planets existing around other stars is not an argument for the unexplained activity on Earth being from those planets. The possibility of life anywhere in our universe is so remote, once again, that we shouldn't even be here. And also, life does not spontaneously emerge. Life doesn't form spontaneously. Without intelligent, creative input, lifeless chemicals cannot form themselves into living things. All ET believers and materialists have is speculation. Also, let's talk about the travel for a minute. Even if one assumed the existence of life somewhere else in the universe, a visit by extraterrestrials to Earth, such as is claimed in UFO reports, it's not practical at all. In fact, according to physics, that means the science, it's impossible. It's impossible because these distances and these travel times are unimaginably vast. And so I can hear it out there already. I can hear it. But they're not physical. They're interdimensional. They're not. All right. So then we're right back to the unseen realm. We're right back to the demonic. For example, the closest star, apart from our sun, the closest star to Earth is Proxima Centauri. It is 41 million kilometers. That's 25 million miles away from Earth. Now think about this. Whatever you believe about the Apollo flights, let's use the telemetry. The Apollo flight took 3 days to get to the moon. At the same speed, one would need 870,000 years to get to the nearest star. And our satellites that orbit the Earth are moved about 15 to 20,000 miles per hour, about 17,000 miles per hour. At that speed, it would take you 870,000 years to get to the nearest star, or from someone in that star system to come here. Now, one could accelerate if you had unmanned craft or probes. They could be accelerated to a greater speed. But what we're saying here is the physics don't allow for it. At the incredible speed of 1/10 of the speed of light, which would kill any biological entity, the trip would still take 43 years to get to the next star. But even if you could do that, it would still take more energy than anyone could produce to carry with you. You couldn't gather enough energy. There's just not enough energy to reach the speed. To go 1/10 the speed of light requires too much energy. It's not doable. Furthermore, in every cubic kilometer of space, there are estimated 100,000 dust particles, right? Made up of little silicates, ice, just little rocks. 1/10 of a gram, not big at all. But at such velocities, and a lot of those are moving at high speeds too, if you collide with even one of these tiny objects, it could destroy the spaceship. Scripture never mentions ET visits. The Bible, the revealed written word of God, teaches that life is only possible through a process of creation. God breathed. Even if there were other galaxies with planets similar to Earth, life could only be there if the Creator had created it. God has given us specific details of the future. For example, the return of Jesus and some details about the world's end. But God tells us that at some point, the universe will be rolled up like a scroll. Isaiah 34:4, Revelation 6:14. Now, if God had created living beings elsewhere, this would automatically destroy their dwelling place as well. And then there's this concept. Sin, original sin. Adam's sin caused all of creation to be affected by the curse. All of creation, all of the universe is affected by the fall, is affected by sin. So why would a race of beings who are not of Adam's seed have their part of creation affected by the curse and then be part of the restoration brought about by Christ, the last Adam? It all seems strange. It's not true. What about the Nephilim? People say, yeah, what you're seeing, what you're dealing with here are Nephilim. Some claim that the Nephilim, or the sons of God, mentioned in Genesis 6, were aliens. Well, that's a wild reach. It takes a common view that the sons of God who married the daughters of men were fallen angels. So it's the text doesn't give us that. But sons of God, Hebrew B'nai Elohim, is clearly used for angels in Job 38:7. Septuagint translates sons of God as angels of God. So a straightforward reading of Genesis 6:4 implies that evil angels cohabited with women. The resultant offspring were called Nephilim, which means fallen ones. You have to be careful when you go digging in the book of Enoch. There's some good stuff there to understand how Jewish writers wrote and about what was happening at that time. But as far as an authoritative text, you have to be very careful with Enoch. That's where a lot of the ideas that the Nephilim are aliens, this is where the ideas come from. Enoch is not inspired text. It has to be taken very carefully. There are challenges in the text, however. The strongest argument for the biblical view is the simplest understanding of the text itself, right? God has given us everything we need in the 66 books of the canon. Also, the New Testament, we find support for this view in Jude 6 and 7, 2 Peter 2, 1 Peter 3. The word Nephilim is only used in Genesis 6 and Numbers 13, but in Numbers it refers to the descendants of Anak, who were big people, perhaps giants, but they were still people. They were still human creatures. Rulers in ancient Egypt also and Mesopotamia often proclaimed themselves as sons of God to enhance their power and prestige. Remember what the word prestige means, sort of like illusion. It's the illusion of authority or power. So another view is that the sons of God were power-hungry rulers and despots who, in their hunger for power and influence, took many wives. They and their offspring, through tyranny, became mighty men of renown. And it's said that Nimrod was described as one of these mighty ones in Genesis 10:8. See, Nimrod was the one in charge at the building of the Tower of Babel, an act of rebellion. So, whatever the correct view is on that, whichever view you take on that, there is no need at all to resort to fanciful suggestions, right, that involve aliens in order to understand the Bible. So, some people say, what about the stars? Why was the universe created at all? Why is it there? Well, the reason the universe was created, the reason the stars were made, is that you see this in several places in the Bible. Psalm 19 and the creation account specifically. But in Genesis 1:14 we read, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and to let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." So our sky is like a clock for us. We see from this that the stars are there for us. The stars are there for mankind on earth. The Lord has put them there for us. Add to this the sequence of creation. On the first day, the earth, and only on the fourth day, all of the stars. It's easy to see that the thrust of the biblical testimony is that the purpose of creation is uniquely centered on this planet. So how then should one understand the UFO phenomenon and all the associated hype? The Bible goes deep on this matter when we think about how should we consider such things. Second Thessalonians 2. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness, in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. The Bible describes reality concerning all things. The living God reveals himself as the triune one, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In heaven there are the angels who also serve mankind on earth, but there is another reality. That is the darkness, the devil and the demons. Ephesians 2:2 talks about the prince of the power of the air, whose reign is on earth. And so the devil has his own repertoire of deception in the form of various occult practices and a multitude of religious rites. Could it be that behind those unexplainable reports of aliens and UFOs, could it be the work of the arch deceiver, Satan? UFO reports by definition are nebulous, hard to identify, ethereal. People who do not know Christ are easily fascinated by all sorts of phenomena that are difficult to explain. But for Christians, Jesus has given a warning. Matthew 24:4. Take heed that no man deceive you. And so the best antidote to deception, no matter what it is to feed on the Word of God. Paul exhorts us in 2 Timothy 2:15 to study Scripture so we might be rightly dividing the word of truth. That means rightly drawing it out of the text, not going to the text to try to prove a theory. Science as an academic discipline and a practical tool doesn't really seem to have the explanatory scope to address this issue of extraterrestrials. So don't expect any kind of scientific epiphanies or great discoveries in this area. And that's because this is a profound spiritual issue. It's a theological issue within Christian doctrine. God created earth first and made the heavenly bodies to serve earth's inhabitants. Genesis 1:14 through 19. Isaiah 45:18 tells us that earth was specifically made to be inhabited, suggesting that humans, not extraterrestrials, are at the center of God's creation. So when we hear from the flat earthers, a lot of times the claim is you shouldn't be believing the heliocentric model that that the sun is at the center of it. That's not what's important about the biblical text, about the God's redemptive history as it plays out in the text. The earth and us, the people living on it, are the center of God's attention. One major issue is the impact of Adam's sin, once again, as described in Romans 8:18 through 22, which is said to have affected the entire universe. Again, extraterrestrials would be affected by this. They would be subject to the consequences of Adam's sin. Or the question is, would they be? Would they be subject to Adam's, especially if they weren't human, if they didn't have human blood? The presence of extraterrestrials ultimately trivializes the Christian gospel. Remember this. This is how we know that the UFO phenomena, the narrative, is essentially darkness, is essentially evil. Because to assume that ETs exist is to trivialize the gospel. Jesus told his disciples that he would leave to prepare a place for them in heaven, John 14. And Jesus is now seated at the Father's right hand, Mark 16, Acts 2. And so all of this seems to preclude the idea that Jesus would make multiple missions of redemption to other worlds in different forms, right? He would have to go to the aliens. He would have to go to in a different form with maybe a different kind of bodily, who knows? It's just not true. Hebrews 10:12 says that Jesus made one sacrifice for sin for all time. And that clearly rules out Jesus repeating his sacrifice in other places throughout the cosmos. So what do you make of all this hype about aliens and UFOs? The unexplainable nature of so many of these sightings. Never forget, this topic gets a lot of attention these days. And there's reasons for that. There are clicks and views to be gleaned. There's money to be made and an opportunity to make a name for oneself if you can get into this subject. Hoaxers and hucksters have promoted UFO sightings. Some of them do it just for fun, others because it's a moneymaker. But as always, satanic deception is a genuine possibility anytime this topic is brought up. The extraterrestrial hypothesis depends on evolutionary naturalism or Darwinian evolution. So for many, the ET hypothesis disproves the Bible. Therefore, given that belief in extraterrestrials turns people away from inerrancy and sufficiency of Scripture, then the possibility of demonic deception is almost guaranteed here. So while it may be a fun topic, we have to remember, just as we said in the last AOT Fringe show, we must take evil seriously. We can't laugh it off. We have to help people understand that believing lies about the fundamental nature of humanity and God's creation has severe consequences. In fact, folks, it's a matter of life and death, eternal life and eternal conscious torment in hell. The reasons for confusing the public, that's one of the questions too, right? Why are they lying to us? If, maybe they're lying to us and keeping the aliens from us, or maybe they're lying to us and want us to believe that aliens exist for some reason. For whatever reason, we certainly know that intelligence agencies and the government more and more engage in the business of deceiving the people. The reasons for deceiving the public might vary from decade to decade. There's certainly occasions where true believers are reporting stories that they really believe are true. Maybe Grush is one of them. But we are not in the dark on these matters. As Christians, we are not in the dark like the rest of the world is. We are not speculating on any of it. The truth about aliens can be known, and we know it. Redemption begins with a correct understanding of who you are, who put you here, why you are here, and where you're going. In Genesis 3, the serpent's very first lie to humanity was intended to corrupt this origin story. Disordered ambition, wanting to be your own God, wanting access to all hidden knowledge. That was the fall. The idea, if man can be like God, then anything is possible. Redemption begins with the acknowledgement that that's your heart. It begins with the acknowledgement of your true origin and purpose. So you have to know you're a fallen sinner. You have to know your condition, that you're a rebel against God. You can't deny it. If you do deny it, then you have to take it up with the scriptures, because the one who says he doesn't sin is a liar. The Apostle John says. Redemption begins with acknowledging who you are, what your condition is, and then also acknowledging that you're created in God's image. Your origin is God. That is your correct origin. And your purpose in this life, in this world, is to glorify God. It's to magnify the name of Christ. And it doesn't matter. You don't believe in God, you're going to serve his purpose anyway. The origin of man traces back to the creation account, the book of Genesis. In the beginning, after God formed the world and spoke into existence all other forms of life, God created man. And God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Genesis 1, 26, 27. So the Bible absolutely asserts that man is the product of a direct and exceptional creative act of God. Isaiah 42. God, the Lord, created the heavens and stretched them out. He created the earth and everything in it. He gives breath. He gives life to everyone. Life to everyone who walks the earth. Scripture does not allow for any other source of origin for humankind. The account in Genesis does not give much detail about how man was created, just that we came from the dust and that God breathed the life into us. But the Bible isn't concerned about providing a scientific explanation for the origin of man. Keep this in mind. The Bible is not a science book. It is a pre-science book. And that means that all the presuppositions in science rely on Scripture. They rely on the author of Scripture, who upholds the universe and all the elements. Scripture's unmistakable message is that God gave the breath of life to man. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Genesis 2:7. So Genesis states that God formed the body of man from pre-existing material, the dust of the ground. But man's soul was an altogether new creation of God, the breath of life. Together, these two natures of body and soul formed man, a living being. Ecclesiastes 12:7, Matthew 10:28, 2 Corinthians 5:1-8, Hebrews 12:9. So when God created man, he gave him a supreme place in the world. Not only were human beings God's final work in the process of creation, but they also provided fulfillment and meaning to the rest of God's handiwork. God made human beings in his own image. They were to multiply and fill the earth, cultivate it, subdue it, and rule over all the other creatures. In this place of earthly dominion, man was created to magnify and give glory to the Creator and Lord of all the universe. Psalm 8. Many scientists support the theory of naturalistic evolution as the origin of man. All you need is billions of years for it to work. While various evolutionists define the theory differently, it can be summarized as the belief that man ascended from lower animals through an unguided, chance process of development. Not only is this theory contrary to the teaching of the Word of God, but it also holds no firm footing in any verifiable, observable facts. Mankind is certainly not ascending from animals to higher. We're not ascending to our spiritual being, or, in the Gnostic sense. Even though evolutionary theory is often presented as established science, established dogma, it is, in fact, nothing but a hypothesis. So, evolutionary theory, macroevolution, that we all come from lifeless chemicals, right, is no more valid than the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Many evolutionists, leading evolutionists, now admit that the origin of species is a complete mystery to them. Dr. D.H. Scott, in a presidential address to the British Association for the Advancement of Science, stated, quote, "All is again in the melting pot." Is evolution then not a scientifically established fact? No, it is not. It is an act of faith, because there is no alternative for those who affirm it. So you see, this is the point for the whole show today. We're looking at a new religious movement, and as Christians, we have to be able, ready. We have to know the language. We have to know how to respond to this. Scientist Ambrose Fleming said, "All that science can say at present in the light of definitively ascertained and limited human knowledge is that it does not know and has no certain proof how, where, and when man was originated. If any true knowledge of it is to come to us, it must come from some source other than present modern anthropology." Oh, isn't that true? It will not come from anthropology. It comes from the Word of God. So as Christians, we accept on faith the testimony of the Bible that God created Adam and Eve as the first man and woman, and from them descended the whole human race. From one man, God has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. Acts 17:26. So the organic unity of the human race in its origin and subsequent fall also relates to Jesus Christ's provision of salvation for humankind. Romans 5:12 and 19. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. Through the disobedience of one man, the many were made sinners. So also through the obedience of the one man, the many will be made righteous. So that is Adam, and then that is Christ. This UFO narrative is a lie of the most insidious kind. The facts are being withheld on purpose. That is how you know they're manipulating you. Anything that questions our true origin or presents an alternative origin story for humanity makes a person vulnerable to fruitless speculation, confusion, makes a person subject to believing lies. Therefore, it becomes very simple for us to discern from where this whole narrative originates. And we know, don't we? We can say for sure that the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the whole UFO narrative as it comes out today, is certainly from the dark side. Let's listen one more time to this comment.
By reading this.
I think you do. Okay. And I think that the dawning math and the evolution of sort of what we are going to discover in the next couple of decades is going to fundamentally transform the way that we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness.
Going to fundamentally change how we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness. And this is not even a religious context, but it just flows forth so effortlessly when we talk about this topic, because it is a false and opposed religion, leading many to hell, distracting many Christians, confusing many people. And so we hope this has been helpful for you tonight. Can I remind you, before we go tonight, please hit that thumbs up, hit that like button over there. I'll tell you, and Summer can tell you too, YouTube has really been squashing us lately, just pushing us. Our views is just I don't know how many are actually watching, but they're really pushing us down. You know, like the views that we get during the live stream no longer count toward the total. So it's hard for our videos to be circulated throughout the platform. So you can help with that just by clicking the thumbs up or the thumbs down, whatever. Leave us a comment. Share the video. That really helps us a lot. That helps these videos perhaps get more traction on the platform. You need engagement. That's what YouTube ultimately, that's what the algorithm ultimately responds to, is engagement. So help us out with that if you can. Leave us a comment. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel and subscribe to our backup channel, which is called True Normal TV. Also, folks, download this Armor of Truth mobile app. It's 100% free. And if you download the app, you're going to get live notifications and a direct link to whenever and wherever we go live. You get exclusive content, articles, reports, and resources, extra podcast material, Bible study material. And if you can support Armor of Truth financially, every donation or gift makes a difference. You can use the Armor of Truth mobile app Give tab. That's the simplest way to support us. Or you can visit our website, armoroftruth.net/donate. That is right here on our website. You click on the donate tab and it takes you there. Many ways to support there. Or you can follow the links in the description below this video. If you can set up a recurring monthly donation to help us plan for the future of Armor of Truth, that is always a big help. So what are you waiting for, folks? Now's the time. Download the Armor of Truth mobile app today. Again, my name is Brad, and I'm usually joined here by my talented and precious wife, Summer, who I would like to say hello to. I love you. I'll see you soon. And I want to thank Summer also for her hard work, her tireless work behind the scenes that a lot of you don't see, but that provides a solid foundation to the research that goes into the work on this channel. So Summer makes it all possible. I couldn't do it without you. And together, we are Armor of Truth, and we're seeking a worldview revolution through God's revelation. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you next time.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism.
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.